Okay, it's my privilege and pleasure to discuss today a National Science Foundation Award to the San Diego Supercomputer Center to produce the Prototype National Research Platform. The SDSC is pursuing this effort in collaboration with GigaIO Networks, and I'm Robin O'Neill, Vice President of Engineering for GigaIO Networks. The National Science Foundation has funded an initial Prototype National Research Platform with the San Diego Supercomputer Center to first be located in San Diego, and will continue to fund additional research platforms across the nation. Their goal is to provide the proliferated capability research around the areas of data-intensive applications and data-intensive science. It's also to provide these capabilities to more of the academic researchers who otherwise don't have access to these kind of data-intensive high-performance computing capability over time. In order to satisfy this demand, there's a number of resource requirements that are, that are required by these researchers. Among them are FPGAs, collections of GPUs, many types of compute platforms to be able to pursue the very diverse data-intensive science and engineering applications. For example, in the life sciences, physical sciences, disaster response, and now we're finding in healthcare as well. Dr. Frank Werthwein is the principal investigator for the BNRP, as well as interim director at the San Diego Supercomputer Center, and he recognizes this need as well or better than most, and indicates the need for a disparate collection of accelerators and computational elements, multiple FPGAs, maybe multiple types of GPUs, types of processors, storage systems, and so on. And because of this disparity of requirements of accelerator types and other computing capability, he wanted the flexibility to bring these together as may be required for the researchers at any given problem space. And so he turned to GigaIO Networks to use their Fabrics technology to bring all of this together with their composable disaggregated infrastructure so that all of these capabilities can be composed and recomposed at will. So Fabrics from GigaIO Networks is a universal dynamic fabric. Think of it as routable PCIe, and in the very near future, routable CXL as well. And it's through this routable PCIe network that we can get both the very, very low latency, the sub-microsecond latency, as well as the very high bandwidth, far greater bandwidth than otherwise can be obtained by using other networks. And so just to give an example of what I mean, if you're, typically you're going to be communicating between two servers. The typical way to do that is to begin, an I/O from a processor. Every I/O begins its life as a PCIe packet, and that packet typically gets routed to a local network adapter within the server, who translates the packet header and copies the data into the header, into the packet, and sends it across the network, and then turns around and immediately copies that same data out of the packet and into the system's memory for server 2. In essence, it translates it right back into a PCIe packet. Well, we'd like to avoid that translation and all of those copies to begin with. And so if we had a way of routing PCIe between servers, that would satisfy the need. And that's indeed exactly what GigaIO Fabrics provides for the BNRP platform. So in addition to server-to-server communication, again, remember, Fabrics is based on PCIe, and again, in the future, CXL. And so because it's based on PCIe, it can support both inter-server communication, server-to-server, in place of, say, InfiniBand or Ethernet or any other network. But it can also support server-to-device communication traffic, as well as device-to-device communication traffic. And so you get that same sub-microsecond latency advantage in all of those usage scenarios. So let me explain, the topology concept, or the very general concept of the Fabrics fabric. And so we'll start out with the top of rack switch. I'm showing a couple of switches here just to indicate they can be cross-linked and into many more topologies as well. And we have the opportunity of servicing customers who simply want to connect their application servers through this fabrics for the very same benefits of the very low latency and very high bandwidth. And we have customers with GigaIO networks today that do precisely this for that reason. And again, you can do the same thing with server to device communication as well. You can take a bunch of devices that are contained within a JBOF or just a bunch of flash, and you can connect that enclosure, or what we call a storage pooling appliance, to the same fabric. And then any of the servers that are connected to that fabric can compose or otherwise own those devices as if they were locally placed within the sheet metal of the server itself. You have, in essence, essentially the same bandwidth access and very, very nearly the same latency. Again, you know, the latency difference is only the cut-through latency on the switch, which turns out to be in the neighborhood of 100 nanoseconds at a time, as you know, as you traverse the switch. So you now you can take one or many more of these devices and compose them to any number of servers that are connected to the same fabric. In addition to that, you could also take storage servers and connect the storage server itself to the fabric, and it may communicate, for example, over NVMe-OF. But in this particular case, the NVMe-OF protocol is not using an RDMA protocol. For example, it's not using Rocky or Ethernet or InfiniBand or anything of that nature where an RDMA is required. A simple DMA is only required once it's connected, because it's still only going over PCIe, and there's never been a translation outside of PCIe. So the actual act of communicating the storage and connecting it to these servers is, again, very nearly the same as if it were local and installed inside the server itself. In addition to that, you can do the same thing with GPUs and connect those directly to the fabric in an enclosure of GPUs. So if you take the JBOG, that's a GPU container. It's a 5U accelerator pooling appliance, which holds up to 8 double-wide GPUs. And you can compose those GPUs, again, to any server or collection of servers. And again, those GPUs will act and behave and perform as if they were plugged directly into the sheet metal, inside the sheet metal of those servers, even though they're across the fabric in this case. And again, it's because of the very low latency and very high bandwidth interconnect. Same thing with a GPU server. If you're communicating GPU server to GPU server, for example, you're going to be using GDR or GPU direct RDMA. But again, in our case, that's not necessarily an R for the RDMA. It can be as nearly close to a DMA as necessary for that kind of communication. Again, because it's all based on PCIe. In addition to that, you can connect more than just GPUs. You can connect anything that fits in a PCIe slot. So any FPGA or collection of FPGAs or of various types, any DPU of any kind, a vector engine of any kind, and plug that in. Any of these can be supported and then composed back and attached to any of the connected servers that are connected to the fabric. And then in the very near future, we'll have the ability with CXL memory semantics to provide shared memory pools. Until then, we already have the ability of providing memory-to-memory, direct memory-to-memory communication server to server, from one server's memory to the other, simply by writing to an address that gets you to the neighbor server or far server. It doesn't matter where it's located, as long as it's on the same fabric. And so you have that, again, that very low latency interconnect and high bandwidth communication of memory-to-memory data as well. So let me point out that with fabrics, you can communicate server to server, server to device, device to device, and memory to memory. Okay, there are various components that make up the GigaIO fabric's capability. I need to explain these so that you'll understand the NRP configuration I'm about to show you. But so that you understand, every server that plugs into the fabric needs an HBA card from GigaIO. It's the fabric's HBA. And this extends the PCIe protocol outside the sheet metal of the server through cables to the top of rack switch, to which other resource boxes are also cabled and devices are made available that way. So the cables themselves, you can have your choice. You can use either copper cable or active optical cable, copper cable up to 3 meters, and active optical up to 100 meters for these interconnects. The fabric switch is a top-of-rack switch. It's a 1U device, and supports cross-link, cascade link, spine leaf, and butterfly topologies, and can be composed in any way that you wish. And again, to connect the devices to the same fabric, you need the pulling appliances. So we have two pulling appliances. One is the storage pulling appliance, and the other is the accelerator pulling appliance. The fabric storage pulling appliance contains up to 24 U.2 SSDs. These are NVMe devices. And again, any of these devices can be composed to any connected server at any time, and that's a dynamic action. You can change them from ownership from one server to another server. And again, they perform, as I mentioned, as if they were local to the server itself. Same thing with the accelerator pulling appliance. You can fit up to 8 double-wide accelerators inside the pulling appliance, whether they're GPUs or FPGAs or anything else, a smart NIC, vector engines, whatever you would like to do. So these are the components that are necessary to create the fabric's fabric. So when creating different topologies of a fabric's fabric, you have choices. And one of the choices, and this is just one example, is you can create this particular type of a gigacell. Now this can be anything. You could have fewer devices and more servers, or less servers and more devices, or you could, instead of a storage gateway, you could plug in another server. I mean, you get the idea, or 2 more servers for that matter. And you also have the ability of interconnecting these gigacells to additional cells, or even to a pod switch through a spine leaf organization. Now, again, let me emphasize that this is just one example of a gigacell. There are many, almost limitless possibilities that you can create with a gigacell. So, as I mentioned, you can connect two gigacells together. They need not be identical. They can be of any topology that you like. And with the 2 gigacells, this now enables up to, in this case, in this example, up to 8 compute servers to communicate with each other over fabrics at the same time. So in other words, the memory from one compute server can be shared and written to the memory of another compute server at, again, this very high bandwidth and very low latency. In addition to that, you can perform GDR communication, GPU to GPU, if you will, from the GPU in one JBOG to the GPU in another JBOG within the cell, as well as across cells using GDR. And there are many other combinations of this as well. But this is one example of doubling a gigacell to get a gigacell XL topology. Now you can grow even more than that and grow to a gigapod. This is using a spine leaf organization of the switches. And so you've got 3 switches in this particular picture, but in reality, you can have up to 6 gigacells attached to a single spine switch, or in other words, pod switch. And so in this case, you have up to 6 gigacells all connected. And again, every one of them can communicate with every other one with exactly the same benefits that I had mentioned earlier. And then if you want to grow even larger, grow even more, you can have another topology where you can create and concatenate multiple gigapods into a single giga cluster. And this, again, just is one example of this. There are many other options available. And you can create, in this case, up to 25 gigacells, aggregating them together through a multiple spine leaf organization. In this particular example, we're representing 100 servers, 400 accelerators, whether they be GPUs or FPGAs or smart NICs or whatever they may be, and also up to 800 SSDs, NVMe style in this example. Okay, so it should be clear that you can achieve just about any topology using the fabric's components. I'm going to mention that each of these compute servers can also be any type of server that you like, whether they're AMD, could be Intel based, could be PowerPC based, it could be ARM based. It really doesn't matter. But in the case of the San Diego Supercomputer Center and the prototype BNRP platform, they've chosen to use the NVIDIA HGX A100 server for some of their servers. And again, that's just fine by us. So from a network topology, a server is a server in that case. And so this is what they're choosing to use. Okay, so as we learned also, Frank and the San Diego Supercomputer Center and the mission of the NRP is to provide a democratized availability of a variety of accelerator types and compute types, as well as storage to a variety of application types for that matter. And to do this, again, you need the ability that GigaIO provides with limitless variation. You can add multiple accelerator pooling appliances. Each of those appliances can contain different types of accelerators. Even within the same appliance, you can contain different types of accelerators. And so in the case where you may have, you may desire mixed GPUs because you're doing some computation followed by some visualization. Or you may have all the same GPUs because you want to use a large collection nickel ring with a CUDA job running all over it. Same thing with the servers. You can compose and extend compute across HGX servers, or they can be any other type of server and a mix of them as well. They don't have to be the same. Same thing with the storage. You can use different types of storage for everything that you like. Okay, so we believe we've met the requirements here for the limit for all of the variations, and this meets also the goal of the program that the NRP program has of bring your own resources, bring your own device program, so that academic researchers can bring whatever they may choose and plug in to the resource boxes. If it happens to be a PCIe connected card, it will function and work inside the GigaIO Smart Accelerator pooling appliances. So some people chose to use vector engines, others FPGAs, others some A100s, or even Optane SSDs work just fine plugged into the box in support of that program. Okay, so this is what we've been waiting for. So this is the topology diagram of the first prototype NRP platform. I'm going to say the first prototype is actually half of this. So the first half of this will be deployed very, in the very near future, meaning around actually deployed and available for use around mid next year. It's going out for bid. Actually, I think it's going out for bid this coming week. But by the time it's all put together and loaded and deployed, we expect mid next year. And then this can be doubled, if you will. You can take this on the left and double it again. So you take 1 gigacell and add another gigacell to it, and now you've got a full system here with a gigacell XL. And so that's the current intent. But again, we'll start with a stage 1 using the gigacell itself. And in this case, the gigacell has 3 fabric switches. And I'm going to start from the top, however. I'm going to talk about some of the network access to the NRP in San Diego. So the intent is to make this very broadly available to researchers across the nation, as well as to additional cooperating NRP data centers throughout the nation. And so providing access to the internet too via CNIC or ESNet, as well as CNIC and ESNet itself for these very wide area network capabilities that provide up to a terabit per second of bandwidth coming into the data center. Okay, and then once we have that kind of connectivity into the gigacell or the gigacell XL, now you have some computing capability in the form of HGX A100 servers. And I'll focus on that for just a minute. If you take these 3 A100 HGX servers, each one of these servers has 8 A100 GPUs. They're the 80 gigabyte variety. And so that's quite a lot of GPU power. There's 24 GPUs in these 3. And wouldn't it be nice if you could create cooperative jobs, nickel rings, if you will, that compose all 3 of these? And so if you were to do that, and you can do that, you're now using the very high bandwidth interconnect through fabrics, again, with a full 256 gigabits per second interconnect between each of these HGX A100 servers for very large, can compose the storage that's in this NVMe storage pooling appliance. And so your groups of these SSDs can be made available to any one of these servers, so that you can take advantage of the NVIDIA GDS or GPU Direct Storage capability. And you can do this even though these SSDs are not physically located internally to these servers. It's still communicating over the same PCIe network. And so there's no difference from the perspective of the GPU or the server that these storage devices don't live directly in the box. And so you can take advantage of GDS communication directly to this storage pooling appliance. Okay, and then in addition to that, there's a cross-link between switches that gets you to a couple of other compute servers, Gen 4 servers, that also can compose and use the FPGAs that are located in these two accelerator pooling appliances. Each of these appliances can hold up to 8 FPGAs, and they can be anything. They don't have to be FPGAs. Like, again, as I said, you could put additional GPUs in here. You could also put vector engines in here. Same thing with SmartNICs and so forth, however you like. And so these servers can compose and use all of these capabilities. Far more devices than would ever fit within the confines of the sheet metal of any of these servers are now possible to compose back to the servers, again, as if they were local, because there is no difference from the perspective of the server itself. It does not know that they're not within the sheet metal itself. Same thing with the NVMe storage over here as well that can be composed by these servers for these jobs. And again, the memory of these servers can be shared with the memory of these HEX servers and vice versa. And these HEX servers can all communicate directly with each other through the fabric, sharing their own memories with each other. And so you get quite the high bandwidth and low latency compute capability across this entire half NRP platform within a single gigacell. And again, as I said, it's extensible. You can add the second gigacell, which is just a replica of the first, connected through the same type of crosslink. And now you've got all of these servers communicating with each other with a total of 10 servers, 48 A100 GPUs if you add them all up through the 6 HGX A100 servers, 32 FPGAs or any other kind of accelerator, and up to 96 SSDs within this full topology. Okay, so there are plenty of advantages of the combination of the NRP, of SDSC's NRP cluster with GigaIO networking capability. Some of the advantages include, as I mentioned already, the very high bandwidth, very low latency. And again, the advantage of also having server to server, server to device, device to device, and memory to memory communication all over the same fabric. Again, with all that very low latency and high bandwidth. Additionally, you can perform north-south communication server to GPU and east-west communication GPU to GPU with that same bandwidth. You also can take advantage of, with the NRP, the composable disaggregated infrastructure provided by GigaIO networks, where you can produce reconfigurable ratios of accelerators to servers or to jobs. And so you have the ability to physically compose on demand without recabling, physically compose various ratios of GPUs to a server. You can do 4, 8, 12, or 16 to 1 for each server, however you choose within a single gigacell. In addition to that, you can compose the storage as well in any combination that you like across the gigacell. So the composable disaggregated infrastructure provides that flexibility that's necessary for the very diverse set of data-intensive workloads in healthcare, in bioscience, as well as in physical sciences and simulations and machine learning and AI. Okay. In addition to all of this, you can use mixed accelerator types. Again, we don't care. You can also bring your own. So bring your own PCIe compliant edge connected card, and you can plug it into one of these accelerator cooling appliances, and it will work just fine. And then also you can extend the composition, as I mentioned earlier, across GPU servers using GPU Direct RDMA, or in other words, GDR. GPU server to GPU server as well, using taking advantage of the fabric's interconnect as well. And then of course, as I showed, as I've shown, you can grow this to quite the large degree. So you start with a gigacell, you move to a gigacell XL, and then you can move to gigapod and ultimately gigaclusters as well, and just simply grow as you go. So in conclusion, GigaIO brings a lot of capabilities that enable the NRP platform to achieve many of its goals. It enables the sharing of resources previously stranded inside other servers, where you had to use that node, and if you didn't use all the devices in that node, you were putting them to waste in the past. Now you can separate and disaggregate the devices from all the nodes, put them in their own enclosures, and then compose them back on demand by your application. In fact, we have customers today that are Slurm-based customers and use the Slurm method to create jobs. And when you create a job, you can now identify more than just the resource of the node or the type of node that you want. You can identify the resources and the types of resources that you want. Whether you want 3 or 4 you want 3 or 4 GPUs, or maybe you want 8 GPUs, maybe 16 GPUs, or do you want GPUs of different types for different purposes? Same thing with FPGAs. You can identify whether you like those or different types, or a vector engine and so on. Impossible configurations. We make the impossible configuration possible. So the idea is that you can have far more accelerators and far more storage than would otherwise fit within the confines of the sheet metal of your servers. And you can recompose these and reconfigure them on demand. So ultimately, the combination of the National Science Foundation's NRP, along with San Diego Supercomputer Center and GigaIO, together we empower under-resourced researchers in academia as co-owners of the NRP, and also enable them to bring their own resources, bring their own devices as well, and have access to resources that otherwise they would not have had. We also enable the variety of AI ML applications, as well as STEM education for both STEM researchers as well as STEM teachers to take advantage of these capabilities. And of course, we enhance them together, the national scientific and industrial competitiveness, and GigaIO is proud to be a part of that. Okay, so it's been my pleasure to talk to you today. I hope you've learned quite a lot about what the NRP is about and what we're doing together. If you have any questions about any of this, you're free to contact GigaIO Networks or also the San Diego Supercomputer Center. Thank you very much and have a rest of the day.